Good evening. Less than a week has passed since US President Joe Biden issued an unconditional pardon to his son Hunter, who was set to face sentencing on gun and tax convictions. Earlier today, new reports emerged that the outgoing president is also considering issuing pre-emptive pardons for prominent critics of President-elect Donald Trump. So, with the prospect of people being absolved from crimes they haven't yet committed, how far could this go? Well, tonight we delve into both the process and the political posturing behind this developing story with our expert guests. But first, Caroline Malone has the latest now from Washington, D.C.
Well, Guy, members of President Biden's current administration have been deep in debate about whether he should issue what would be an unprecedented level of pardons for people who are not on trial, but who future President Donald Trump's team have said they will go after. The idea would be to act preemptively to prevent people being targeted politically in the future Trump administration. Well, some of the names being discussed include Republican Liz Cheney, who's spoken out against Trump and campaigned alongside Democrat and Vice President Kamala Harris. Well, others include former Health Director Anthony Fauci, who was prominent in urging for protections such as masks and vaccines during the COVID-19 pandemic, and who became a political target from the far right. Then there are people like Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, who formerly led federal cases against Trump for election subversion, and Democratic Senator Adam Schiff, who led an impeachment hearing against Trump when he was last president. Well, reports suggest that White House officials are considering these pardons, in particular because the nominees Trump has put forward for his next administration are those that have vowed retribution. They include Pam Bondi, who defended Trump in his first impeachment hearing, who would lead the Justice Department, and Kash Patel as FBI director, who's openly talked about coming after several members of what he describes as the deep state. Well, views are split on whether this is a good idea. While some Democrats have urged Biden to take these threats seriously and act, others, including Representative Schiff himself, have said he doesn't think it's a good idea, that it would be defensive and unnecessary, and that he thinks the courts are strong enough to withstand the threats. Well, this debate comes after President Biden issued a blanket pardon for his son Hunter for a 10-year period from 2014 to 2024. And that removes him both from sentencing over gun and tax charges, but also any future retribution by the Trump administration. Well, that's already brought a level of controversy from people saying it goes too far. But if he was to issue these new widespread pardons for people who haven't even committed a crime, purely over concern for what Trump might do, that would be on a whole new level and something that's not been seen before in the United States. Caroline Malone, A News, Washington, D.C.
Well, earlier, the New York-based economist and founder of Bellwether International came into the A News newsroom to talk with me about the political atmosphere influencing these developments. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us, coming into the A News studio on your trip here from New York. I wanted to start by asking you to help demystify what's going on at the moment. We've spoken a lot about the presidential pardon process being used as a political football. We know there's more and more polarization going on in politics in the US as well as elsewhere in the world. What's going on, and should we be pessimistic about this just becoming something that continues?
Thanks for having me on. I think where I want to start is just by painting the context. Bellwether International is working in genocide communities, and we're working to prevent conflict worldwide. And obviously, long before there's genocide, there are these common elements: polarization, the breakdown of rule of law. And so we need not look just at where there is war and conflict to be wary of some of those early indicators. And I think what everyone is feeling in the United States and elsewhere is, yeah, there won't be genocide in the United States, but what happens in the United States can cause conflict in other parts of the world. And so the presidential pardon, the election of Donald Trump for a second term, and a series of other events, I think, have put everyone on notice that we need to be vigilant in protecting democracy. Let me share two observations. that we're seeing both in the United States but writ large around the world. The first is that democratic parties, liberal or progressive parties, are increasingly developing a culture of elitism. And this is creating massive disconnect between the people they represent and the social values which define liberal movements. The second is that Republican parties all over the world are becoming more and more connected to, as the Azerbaijanis would say, the simple man, the common man, but are developing myopic views of economic policy, particularly. Republicans who for decades have touted their conservative practice, their traditional views, are subscribing more and more to short-term economic gains, short-term political relief. And so you have this really interesting tension in the United States right now where Biden, acting in the spirit of elitism, is pardoning a family member, and at the same time, huge swaths of the Republican Party voting for short-term economic gains, notwithstanding other consequences, social consequences and other consequences. And we have to directly confront that tension and really think about what I think is the greatest threat to democracy in the United States, and that's apathy.
Interesting. I mean, how hopeful are you that we can find a path through this? Because it seems, for many observers would say, that being moderate, being centrist at the moment is the least fashionable thing to be.
Not only the least fashionable, but it's being programmed out of society by social media algorithms and by disinformation. And the only way we're going to combat large-scale disinformation, which is coming through social media sources, is through connection, human connection. So we have to use new strategies to address evolving complex problems. And the way information is delivered right now in the United States, and as a result, other parts of the world, is that I get the information I'm comfortable with. I get the information that supports my political views, that supports my view of the world, my values, and there's no human connection to directly confront that. So we can't target the breakdown of democracy with information. Right. We're inundated with information. The only way we're going to confront the elitism, the myopic approaches, and the large-scale tensions, and you could say brewing conflicts between political parties, people of faith and non-faith, is through human connection, learning to connect across the political divide, the religious divide, and I'm going to say internationally. The United States is isolated from the world. We forget that our own politics are being watched by millions of people, and there are people watching and saying, well, the United States has done this, and now so will we. That has consequences. That has life and death consequences in some cases. So the human connection can be a direct confrontation to the disinformation and the increasing polarization of the United States.
Human connection being the answer, the antidote to all this. Thank you so much for coming in to say.
Pleasure's mine. Thanks so much.
Now let's speak to our Washington analyst, Obey Sharbandar. Obey, always good to talk to you. What are the views of the American people, the American population, regarding President Biden's pardoning of his son, Hunter?
Well, the unprecedented pardoning of a president's son is being met with wide outrage, both amongst liberals and conservatives here in the U.S. and amongst the wider public and the punditry here in Washington. And let me explain just what makes this move by President Biden so unprecedented in modern American politics. It is a wide-reaching pardon. Now, while it is fully within President Biden's right to pardon his son, Hunter Biden, what is so unique about this pardon is that it covers any crimes that may or may not have been committed from 2014 all the way until modern day. And what's really been met with such wide outrage particularly by Democrats here, and it's not just Republicans, is the fact that the way that it's been handled, the way that President Biden announced the pardoning of his son, Hunter Biden, who was expected to be sentenced for federal crimes, tax evasion and gun crimes in mid-December. The way that it was handled has really irked a lot of Democrats. It was announced just prior to a big visit by President Biden to Africa. And usually when these pardons are announced, the presidents in the past like to wait until the very last moment, right before they leave office, and they typically bundle them with a series of other pardons. But the way this has been handled has really left a bad taste in many Democrats and the wider public, who view, perhaps rightfully so, that President Biden is essentially trying to cover up crimes by Hunter Biden, including potential financial crimes or lobbying irregularities that may have taken place after President Biden left office as vice president, that may have been connected to Hunter Biden's lobbying work for Burisma, a gas company in Ukraine, and a Chinese energy company. That work that Hunter Biden was engaged with may have been connected, according to some pundits in Washington D.C., to when Joe Biden was vice president, a pay-to-play type of corruption scenario. So this why 12-year pardon is really leaving many wondering in Washington and across the United States. Is Joe Biden essentially trying to cover up crimes that may have implicated him, connected with Hunter Biden's wide lobbying work in the past? So in short, broad outrage by both Democrats and Republicans, and according to, for example, the New York Times on Wednesday said that this set a dangerous precedent. And by that, it means that other presidents, and of course with President Trump, coming to office, can similarly use the pardon to pardon family members in the future. So that Pandora's box has been opened.
The box has been opened, and that was 12 years in the past, Obey, but also we've been seeing that there's been a look towards the future as well, where we're now hearing about these preemptive pardons, pardoning groups of people, particularly President-elect Trump's possible targets. That's quite an unexpected development, isn't it? The idea of pardoning somebody for a crime that hasn't yet been committed.
That's right. Now, while it is within the full prerogative and constitutional rights granted to a president, this is another very unique potential move that there are reports here in the U.S. that President Biden may seek to give preemptive pardons to people like Anthony Fauci and to former legislator Liz Cheney. Now, that's in part because President Trump and his team have gone in and said, hey, they are going to investigate what they believe to be irregularities that could have potentially broken the law by senior Biden officials. They want what President Trump's team is calling governmental accountability. And the fact that Joe Biden may be considering preemptive pardons, and what that means is that it would pardon these individuals for any crime that may or may not have been committed. It is essentially a blank check. So that would prevent Republican lawmakers and President Trump's attorney general from investigating these individuals for crimes that could or may have been committed, particularly the crime of perjury, which is what many analysts believe that Anthony Fauci had committed when he testified to Congress. And Anthony Fauci is really a big sort of focus here of so many in the conservative movement who believe that he essentially covered up what they believe to be the origins of the COVID leak that they believe has been leaked, according to many reports, including intelligence reports, that the virus was released from a Wuhan lab in China that may have been connected to a U.S. lab that Anthony Fauci knew about it, but lied to Congress and the American people. So that pardon, if it does take place by President Biden, would essentially give cover to Anthony Fauci and to Liz Cheney, who a former Republican lawmaker has come out and endorsed Joe Biden, and of course endorsed Kamala Harris in her failed run for the presidency. So now in Biden's defense, the argument is that, well, President Trump is coming in and he has a list of people that he wants to go after. Of course, President Trump's defenders say that, well, it is within the full president and the incoming Department of Justice to investigate what could have been crimes committed against the American people, given the wide conservative American belief that it was President Biden's own Department of Justice that was weaponizing the law to go after President Trump due to a political vendetta. So this seems to be a cycle here where going after political opponents just leads to the other side going after their political opponents. Now, and again, pundits and law experts here in the U.S. believe that preemptively pardoning people in such a general blanket term really sets a precedent where now President Trump could easily do it, and he would be not only fully within his right, but now a precedent has been set by Joe Biden. And that is really why there's such outrage here, because President Biden had previously promised not to pardon Hunter Biden and to respect the rule of law. And now we are seeing, of course, President Biden go back on his word.
And Obey, there's still quite a lot of time, of course, in this transition before President-elect Trump assumes office in January. What else do you think we can expect from President Biden's team as this transition process continues?
I think certainly there'll be a wide slew of additional pardons that will take place. Historically, pardons will take place all the way up till right before inauguration on January 20th. So you can expect a series of additional pardons. Of course, President Trump, pardoned Jared Kushner's father and, other supporters of President Trump. But we've never seen a president pardon his son or his daughter for what was widely believed to be major financial and lobbying irregularities that could have been tied to essentially using their position of proximity to power to gain financial gain. But I think you can expect some additional pardons by Joe Biden. Certainly the Hunter Biden one was the most controversial one that has led to significant outrage across the political spectrum here. But if President Biden does opt to give a preemptive pardon to Anthony Fauci, that is going to be met with wide condemnation amongst both conservatives in the U.S. and probably many in the center left as well. But you can certainly expect a series of pardons of individuals that are politically tied to Joe Biden, and there are many who are lobbying for the way that this works is that lobbyists who are close to the administration will lobby on behalf of their clients to gain a full presidential Biden. And what a presidential pardon essentially cleans the slate. So not only are you pardoned for your crime, but you are no longer have a criminal record. So a presidential pardon is a highly sought after favor here in Washington.
Obey, this entrenched political polarization that seems to be a big part of this, is this now here to stay? Are you hopeful that there could be a more positive way forward, or is this just going to continue in the near future?
Oh, this polarization is certainly going to continue. Look, you have to understand that President Trump himself and his supporters believe that President Biden and the Democrats have used what is being called lawfare, essentially weaponizing the justice system and the Department of Justice to go after President Trump, to try to essentially force President Trump to be stuck in a series of lawsuits and criminal trials so that President Trump would not be able to focus on the campaign. Of course, President Trump won the election. He's going to serve a second term. But that left many of his supporters with a desire to fight back against the Democrats. And, we're seeing that with President Trump's nomination for the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who is a close supporter of the president. And of course, with Kash Patel, a strong supporter of President Trump, who in the past has said that the intelligence community and the FBI was weaponized by the Democrats to go after President Trump and to launch illegal surveillance of President Trump and his supporters. particularly those that believed that the intelligence community and the FBI were using means that were to investigate President Trump that were essentially part of a political campaign to try to bring down President Trump and his team. So there is that sense of tit for tat for sure. And when we hear major American newspapers like the New York Times saying that a dangerous precedent has been set, because it means now that any future presidents, including President Trump and future Democratic and future Republican presidents, can then look back to this precedent that's been set by Joe Biden to justify any major pardons that would have otherwise, led to major public backlash. So a new normal is being set here.
A new normal indeed. Obey Shannabar, thank you very much. As always, great to see you. Obey there for us in Washington. Well, that is all we have time for on this hour. Thank you very much for watching. Please do stay with us on A News, and from all of us here on the NewsHour team, we wish you a very pleasant evening ahead.